think that's what's so compelling. It's making everyone question other sites around the world. It really is kind of like a revelation constantly when you go there and kind of see what's coming out of the ground. To me, this is what I call a super civilization, the world's first one. It's got red, white, and black pigment has been found on it. This could then suggest that the entire site had red, white, and black pigment on it, maybe other colors. There are other underground cities that have been found recently. Now we're talking, there could be up to 60 underground cities. Some people say there's up to 200. If it ever got uncovered, they wanted everyone to know, we can record the winter solstice, thank you very much. The people of Göbekli Tepe who were starting to measure the Earth, I think after the end of the last ice age, they were going around the world, they were like wanting to survey the planet. They were marking different latitudes to take their readings to measure the Earth.
Yeah, Hugh, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So you came on the show. We did a virtual conversation, and then a couple weeks ago, you're like, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. You want to meet in person and re-record?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, man! Got to get you in the studio, see some faces. We can talk some more." So I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface the last time. There's a lot more to cover. You got a lot of good stuff that you're working on.
There's quite a bit of stuff, yeah, for sure. And yeah, to see these vases, as we call them in
Right,
England,
right.
it's pretty impressive. I mean, and we're going to get into some of the similar, objects that have been found in southeast Turkey, where
Right.
we've been focusing on. But yeah, no, we covered quite a bit of ground last time. But there's even since last time, I've been to Turkey once or twice, and it's still being excavated. There's still discoveries being made. And it really is kind of like a revelation constantly when you go there and kind of see what's coming out of the ground.
They haven't kicked you out yet.
Almost. Getting there. Close. We're that close.
Well, good. You're getting your last couple trips in. Then we'll make them good ones. Well, good, man. Yeah. So what's new since the last time we talked?
Well, since we were over there in September in southeast Turkey, just I'll put it in context for people. We're talking about the sites of Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, newly kind of excavated site called Sayburç, and there's a few others starting to be excavated now, like Harbet Suvan, Sefir Tepe, and a few others. And these all date back to the end of the last ice age, so we're talking 11,600 years or thereabouts, going to about 10,500 years ago. So this is quite an epic timescale we're dealing with here, and we're seeing some beautiful artwork, beautiful stonework, advanced technology for its time, innovations, astronomical alignments, and everything else. But to me, this is what I call a super civilization, the world's first one. This is like outrageous what is coming out of the ground, and the innovations that have come out of there. And so when we were there last time in September, like for example, Sayburç is one of the sites, and it's basically west of Şanlıurfa, which is the main city, the main town. That's all kind of all the sites are almost based around, if you like. It's the ancient town of Edessa, and so it's like quite well known in biblical kind of chronology with Abraham, Nimrod, and so forth. But Sayburç, which is a few miles west of there, is remarkable. I mean, for a long time, it was built upon, a village was built upon it, and so most of the things were covered up. But now they've kind of actually recently removed the house that was covering this huge, beautiful rock-cut carved enclosure, which was famous for the guy holding his kind of part with the leopards around him and the bull and the auroch figure with another human figure like jumping, which is called a narrative scene. So now, I mean, I can show you this image here. This just shows you kind of what it looks like now. And so the whole house above it has been completely removed. And so before this, it was like indoors. And so this whole area has now been completely uncovered.
Is that the former next door neighbor?
That is they're going to be former next door neighbours when their house is getting knocked down,
Is it?
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But they're all being moved to another area. Apparently, they're all being kind of compensated, so it's not all bad.
Okay.
But it's worth it. Just the archaeology is just unbelievable, and you can see the narrative scene here. all of this is carved out of bedrock,
Wow.
everything,
Wow.
So it's like there are other enclosures where they have T-pillars. I mean, in fact, this has actually got T-pillars. If we look at this, this is a 3D scan I did of it quickly when I was there. And you can kind of get a sense of the shaping of it. And also one of the central T-pillars is now being exposed, which it's broken, but you can see it there. There's even a hole in the ground as well, which is very much like a kiva, like we find in Native American tradition, where the first people kind of came up from and things like this. And you can see the shaping here around the bench, or the kind of step or bench, whatever you want to call it. It's almost got spaces where people would sit, but we don't know if they were for sitting or things were placed there, or whether large blocks of stone and T-pillars were placed in some of the thinner ones. But if we spin around here, you can get a sense of it. And this is like 42 feet wide, basically. So, and I've managed to get some very interesting measurements out of this as well. Last time on the show, we looked at the geometry of it to get a sense of it. But now the measurements are really fascinating me because I'm fascinated by ancient metrology and like we found in Egypt, we found in the stone circles of Britain. Now it seems to be here as well. They were using very specific, very accurate measurements. I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of these sites.
I could look at that thing go around in circles all day.
It is. There's something beautiful about it, isn't it?
So cool.
It's like having a little drone just flying around to get it. So yeah, we looked at the geometry last time, which features this kind of thing, possibly. Now we're still trying to work out what it is. It could be an ellipse, but we don't know because half of it's still not been excavated.
Okay.
As you can see here, you see that whole part on the left.
Got it.
That's not been excavated. But what we were able to do was find the spot on the other side where the other edge of the enclosure was. Now that really impressed me because what I was able to do was be able to measure it within this app, on the phone. You basically, when you scan the site, you can actually kind of take perfect measurements. So the width of it, the wide width of it, is 42 British feet, and the other angle going through it was exactly 36 British feet, and that kind of is interesting in its own right. So that makes it a 7:6 ratio, if you're looking at ratios. But the measurements, if you go into the old measurements, this is what blows my mind now. Not everybody is interested in ancient measurements, but I certainly am. So 42 feet equates to 40 Persian feet, and a Persian foot is 1.05 feet. And we've found that over and over again in Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, places like Stonehenge and other, even like in Egypt as well. It's part of a kind of tradition, an ancient canon of a breakdown of an earth measurement. So it's a subdivision of earth measures. So there's an understanding of the size and shape of the earth potentially in these sites. For example, a Persian foot, I think 1 English mile is 5,280 feet, something like that. But it's exactly 5,000 Persian feet, which is bizarre, but it is. And in Stonehenge, they found Mike Parker Pearson, the head archaeologist there. He did some research on that, and they found what is called the Longfoot, repeated quite frequently within Stonehenge. The Longfoot is the same as the Persian foot. It's 1.05 feet, or just over 1.05 feet. So we found that over and over again there. So we're finding it here as well. So the 42, the main width of it, which going left to right on that one, is 42 feet, which is 40 Persian feet. That's what it equates to. But the other, going from top to bottom across that way, we found the other edge of it, and that's 36 feet, British feet, which equates to 40 Assyrian feet, which is a slightly, shorter one than a foot. So we've got 40 Persian feet by 40 Assyrian feet in one structure. And both those lengths of foot, which are slightly different, but they're all all perfectly harmonically connected with the British foot, are found at Göbekli Tepe and all the other sites. So both of these measurements are found at other sites. So it matches what we're finding across the region, that they had standard units of measure, but not just one unit. They use multiple units, which are all harmonically connected to one another. This is the nature of the modern understanding of ancient metrology. based on the work of John Neal and John Michel. Also, but
So what does that tell us? I mean, that tells us that there was some ancient system of measurement that all of these other, the Persian and all of these other systems of measurements kind of grew from. Is that what you're thinking?
yeah, basically what it appears is that all these measurements are kind of mostly based on a subdivision of the size of the Earth or size of the degree of latitude and things like this. Like we saw 5,000 Persian feet is a English mile and things like this. It's quite, if you start looking into it in great detail, you find all these kind of strange coincidences that they seem to have an understanding of the size and shape of the Earth, even back here, back in this era. I know Graham Hancock, who you spoke to recently, he's like emphasizes that through the old maps.
Right.
You know, and longitude, they understood longitude and things like this. And so I think it's the same thing, but maybe a bit it's much earlier than people realized, you know, that they were actually measuring the Earth in deep antiquity. And there's good evidence of that. I mean, it's not that big a deal. I mean, you can go and measure things. You can use shadows and poles and things like this at certain times of the day and year to get measurements. That's how they worked out the degree in Egypt, where they, you know, setting up things at certain times of year, so the sun would create certain angles and they would repeat that all the way down to the other degree level and so forth. Also, you can use the stars and things like this, but I think what we're finding here is that these weren't arbitrary measurements. They weren't just random. They were using a system that they understood, and I believe they had probably a few different measurements, maybe 5 or 6, all, you know, different variations of the foot, and we find them over and over again at these sites. And so I am completely blown away that these measurements came out of this. You know, I mean, I need to do a little bit more research on this, double, triple check everything. But the fact that you're finding it is, you know, whole numbers as well. That's the key. You've got to find whole number measurement. If you find 36.2, it doesn't really make much sense.
Right. So this whole part on the bottom is not excavated yet.
No, but
Okay.
they found the other edge of the enclosure.
Okay. And so are they going to excavate the rest of it then?
They are.
Yeah,
They're doing it
good,
now.
Good. They're not going to plant trees on the top of the rest of it?
I hope not, but there are trees right next to it because this was a kind of, people were living here. You know, this was like as you can see here, you got a tree there, but this is like a village.
Well, hopefully it's not an olive tree, and they can get rid of it.
But you mentioned the trees. We can just talk about that for a moment because a Turkish news report or an interview came out recently, and they actually say they're going to remove some of the trees now. You know, this is what I heard. You know, I actually got sent a copy of it, a translation of it. They're going to remove some of the trees. They're going to excavate other parts of Göbekli Tepe.
Huh.
So I know you've been talking to Jimmy about
did,
this.
yeah,
Jimmy Corsetti. And so thankfully, maybe he's kind of, you know,
Good.
got them doing stuff.
Good,
you
good,
know.
good.
So they claim they were going to do it anyway, but let's see, let's
right.
see. But so more, you know, there are gentle excavations being done at Göbekli Tepe, gradual, very slow. They're working on enclosure B just at the moment, and also they're kind of tidying things up because it's all got a bit kind of messy there over the last, you know, just the sort of chaotic. There's so much rubble, it's crazy.
Yeah, but back to here then. So can we go back to that first shot that you pulled up?
Yeah.
The overhead or the scan. So the 42 is from top to bottom here, or quickly becoming left to right here,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then the 36 is from the guy holding himself all the way straight across that
Yeah.
hole in the middle, and then you found the other. They know where the other side of it is, so they know it's basically. Is it a circle? Is it an oval? It's a bit of an oval, I
It's
guess.
a bit of an oval, but
Yeah.
interestingly, if we just look at, let me just find the image. It can't be a perfect ellipse like this because it would be too short. You know, one side of it. It actually fits more closely to this. It's not. I don't think it's going to be this. You know, this is. I've actually got a wager on this with Andrew Collins. I'm convinced it's going to be this, which is a flattened circle type B, which you find in British stone circles, and he's convinced it's going to be that. Now, it's not going to be that for sure because the top to bottom length is longer than that. It's closer to that, but it may be an extended kind of obtuse, a little bit, out of shape.
42 by 36 is
Yeah.
closer to a circle than an egg. So
Yes,
this is,
yeah.
this is, yeah.
So, but we'll see. We're going to wait and see. Hopefully, I'm going to earn 10 English pounds from my wager. So let's see how that unfolds.
Okay. What about those images on the wall then? Are anything crazy come out of there besides the dude?
Yeah, so either side of the dude, notice one of his hands is holding his phallus.
Yep.
This is you actually find this on numerous other statues in the area. He's got ribs showing and a kind of shoulder kind of bones showing. He looks like he's wearing some kind of hat, and he's kind of holding himself somehow. But he's got two leopards on either side of him coming towards him. The further left, you've got another human figure on the other side of the leopards, who looks like he's kind of dancing or jumping. He's holding some kind of bola or snake in his hand. And to the left of that, you have an auroch, quite a large bovine, basically, which were known to exist in this area. It's very similar to carvings you find at Göbekli Tepe as well. And so some people say it's a narrative scene. That's the official stance on it. It could be astronomical. It could represent Taurus. The man on the left could represent, Orion the hunter. The leopards could represent Leo. We don't know. There's lots of. It could be the Gemini. We don't know. There's lots of different interpretations of that right now. No one actually knows the correct. We're going to analyze it, myself and J.J. Ainsworth, in our next book. That's the plan. Andrew Collins believes it's like a representation of bull leaping, the first ever bull leaping ever. Because it actually looks like that, the way he's jumping. But we're not sure. It's still down to interpretation, which is one of the big issues in archaeology, really. Who gets to interpret things? Who's allowed to interpret it? Who's allowed to kind of put their opinions and research into it? And I think that's what's so fascinating about this area, because there's a huge amount of symbolism, huge amount that is coming out there. And now the work is on. The game is on. Who's going to interpret it first? Who's going to kind of get the actual information correct? When it comes down to knowing what they were trying to tell us.
So leopard and bull, basically, right?
In this one, yeah.
Yeah. And is that? I mean, how can you be sure? I guess on the leopard specifically, like.
Yeah, that's a good question. For a long time, they thought they were often representations of lions. Like in Göbekli Tepe, for instance, we have the Lion Pillars building. That's an interesting part of the site for sure. And now I think they've actually changed the name to the Leopard Pillars building, because it is more likely to be leopards than it is any other kind of creature depicted there. And the leopards are found over and over again in Karahan Tepe.
Okay.
A lot, a huge amount there. So that kind of backs up the idea that they're probably leopards. And also they're known to exist, and they found leopard bones. It was known to exist in this area at this time.
Okay. Any other carvings on the walls?
There's quite a lot going on at Sayburch, actually. Like you've got this area here, which they think actually this is outside. So the house behind it, see that there, that is actually completely vanished now. This was before that, to give you a bit of context. So that house and all the buildings just behind this have gone. But this they think is actually a Roman quarry. And actually, this isn't part of the actual Taztepeler site. But you see where the circle is? Just there, you got this. This is about, 2.5 feet wide. And this is some kind of amoeba type carving. It's got some kind of mushroom shaped or serpent headed shape with all these dimples all around it. This is definitely Taztepeler era. This is definitely from that era. And the Romans left that there. They didn't disturb it. They didn't destroy it. They just worked next to it to get their stone, which is really interesting. So there is actually a case to be made that that area we saw that was like quarried could actually be ancient. It could actually be part of the ancient construction.
As opposed to Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But traditionally it's right, because there is a Roman settlement just near here.
Okay.
So they know Romans were here, Byzantines and so forth.
Okay.
And just behind over there on the right, I don't have images here, but there's actually an underground area, like going 2 levels down, carved out of the bedrock, 2 rooms basically.
Really?
Yeah, with steps going down.
Huh. You got any pictures of that?
I don't know if I've got them here, but I can certainly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's not huge. It's not much to look at, but they were carving into the bedrock, making underground areas, and we know that for a fact because most of the enclosures are carved down into the bedrock, so they definitely had the ability to work in the stone and leave beautiful 3D relief carvings, coming out of the stone. So they were master masons. They really were technically brilliant. And also we found a tunnel, like it goes about 120 feet, sloping at 45 degrees into the ground, not far in this general area, it's a few miles away from here, carved out of the bedrock, just next to one of the unexcavated Testapela sites. And that surprised us, but it's there, it's for real. And so there's all sorts going on here. I can provide a couple of photos of that for sure. And so there's much more to this culture than meets the eye. It makes you question as well, like the underground cities of Derinkuyu,
just thinking that.
further to the west, but also they found underground cities further to the east. Yeah, this is actually a tunnel at Cheanu, another site. This is another site. And so this is the pre-pottery Neolithic site of Cheanu, which is further north near Deir Bakar. And there's a tunnel there as well. And look how far it goes down. It goes down about what? It's called 40 Steps, that's the name of it. It goes down about 100 feet. And it is one that Andrew investigated, that's Andrew there, myself, in 2004. And last time he went there was then. So we had to it took a while to find it. He couldn't remember where it was. So we found it, and there's another tunnel very similar to the one in near, in the general region of Sayburch and Göbekli Tepe that we investigated previously. So there's a whole sort of thing going on. There's some people question whether the ones here are that old, or whether they're just Byzantine or Roman wells and things like this. Some people have suggested they are, but it just seemed like the Testapela people could do it. And even at Derinkuyu, I mean, one of the interesting things about that, this is way over in Cappadocia, further to the west. This is, the first levels are the oldest in Derinkuyu, for instance. Yeah, they always are first levels, and they go down, they get newer and newer. But the first levels are clearly not, there's no metal scraping on the walls to create them. This is like done with harder stone or antler picks, things like this, and intricate stuff with obsidian. They found, there's actually a book that came out, and one of the archaeologists there found the river and the stream where they threw all the debris into it that they scraped out of there. And within that debris, he found Paleolithic and Mesolithic hand tools and scrapers going back past Testapela era, older than that, going back possibly 20,000 years, up to like 10,000 years ago. And that information just disappeared. But luckily, Andrew got a copy of the book years ago when he was there and got the data. And we've managed to find another copy when we were there last time, and I've got one at home now, where it says that. And that's been ignored. I mean, that's not on, I don't think that's on Wikipedia anymore, for instance. They kind of removed that information. But so they have proven now, certainly the first level or two down, to go back very early era, and that's the same levels you've got at Sayburch. So it's quite impressive.
So how many years before present then would that put them?
Well,
given the tools.
Well, the ones in at Derinkuyu, possibly I don't think they give exact dates, but they go into the Paleolithic. So we're going anywhere between the Testapela era of 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, all the way back, possibly 20,000, something like this. So, but it's quite interesting that there's some evidence for very early work carving into stone and creating caves, not just using natural caves that are there. But the one at Cheanu, which we just looked at, that looks like it was partly natural, and then they kind of carved the steps down into it and possibly used it as a well. But I think these were used for more possibly ceremonial purposes, and also to observe, the movement of the heavens above, looking out.
Not the tunnels, but the
tunnels, yeah.
The tunnels? Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're like a perfect kind of window to observe through. And I think that's what the enclosures and the hold stones that we find at like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe were partly used for as well. They were used to, you sit in one spot on one of those nice benches that probably had, nice animal furs on it and things like that. You sit in one spot, the kind of priestly kind of shaman dude or woman, whoever, would be looking out and like watch the stars or the sunrise and things happen, for that period of time, for whatever they were specifically looking at. And I think that's heavily overlooked in the Taz-Templar region, the astronomy.
And so your thought would be more ritualistic, ceremonial, as opposed to they had to dig because of something that changed, some catastrophe or something, that the climate changed, that they had to go underground. I mean, any speculation on that, the potential for that to be why these were dug?
Yes, there has been discussions about this, about why you would have these underground cities. Now, remember that the first levels, the first earliest phase would have been just 1 or 2 levels. So that wouldn't have been a huge amount of people could go in there, especially at a place like Derinkuyu. Just a reminder, there are other underground cities that have been found recently. Now we're talking, there could be up to 60 underground cities. Some people say there's up to 200.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just in Turkey?
In Turkey. Yeah, they found some in Midyat, which is further east from Şanlıurfa, which is, almost towards, it's going right into the heart of the Taz-Templar region. It's in between the Tigris River and the Euphrates, between, where most of these Taz-Templar sites are. And you can go in there. They're going to open it up to the public soon. There's another one called something like 40 Eyes or something like that, which is located near Asikli Hoyak, which is another later Taz-Templar site, which is like more related to Çatalhöyük than it is. Here we go. Here's one of them here, and so they're not just in Cappadocia. They're all over South Turkey, Southeast Turkey, stretching all the way out to the east.
When were these found?
The one in Midyat was relatively just a few years ago.
Okay.
And there's one in Konya as well. And then there's one near Asikli Hoyak as well. And Konya is near Çatalhöyük, which is the 7,500 BC city, basically. One of the first places where there was a proper ancient city in that part of the world. That was the main site in Turkey, before Göbekli Tepe was discovered. That was found back in the 50s, 60s kind of thing. So there's a huge amount, to consider.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize for a long time, Turkey wasn't the most interesting place to go for a lot of people. Now it's the most interesting. It's like rewriting history just by what's being discovered. And the fact that many of these were buried as well, the sites like Göbekli Tepe and so forth, is interesting. Why they would close down these sites rather than kind of leave them open. But in a way that preserved them, that enabled the discoveries now to be so pristine.
Right. So, yeah, so speculation then just on all the underground cities that are being found then, like in terms of when do you think they were? Because you can't date them, right? Are they able to find organic material and date any of those yet, or is it?
Well, people have lived in them constantly. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah. There's no breaks.
Yeah.
People use them. I mean, they're there. They're going to use them.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, I think when finding the debris, when the archaeologists found the debris, that was the key to kind of unlocking it. But then you can see by the types of tools that are used on making them. You can see the tool marks on the walls, whether they're metal, which would be later, the Hittite era, or whether they would be, more Paleolithic or Mesolithic or pre-pottery Neolithic tools. So that's the best way to date them, I think. But I think some information is going to be coming out soon. I think they're doing research on the one at Midyat and the one in Konya. So let's see what happens.
Good. Yeah, it feels like Derinkuyu was kind of lumped into that whole nothing before 2500 BC kind of category, and so it was just kind of put in there with everything else. So we didn't know how to dig a hole before that, so it must be that old. But now with all these Taz-Templar sites being uncovered, it's like, well, maybe we can have a little bit more open minds about how old some of these underground sites might be.
Yes, true. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and you mentioned also, I forgot to mention, you asked about what they were used for. Now, there is a debate whether they were built before the end of the kind of Ice Age, and they were actually used to protect themselves from airbursts and impact events. We know that down south in Syria, at one of the sites there, there's an airburst was recorded, I think Tel Harura or something, and that is really intriguing. I mean, I know several people have written about this. This is part of the Younger Dryas kind of hypothesis theory, because there was actual airburst evidence of them found at an actual site just a couple of 100 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe. And so if that was happening, you could understand, you know, in that general area, why people might want to go underground. It's going to kill a whole bunch of people.
As a reaction to that event.
Yeah, or maybe it was just happening, I think, with the Younger Dryas. I mean, I'm not an expert on the Younger Dryas, but I'm aware of the whole story of it, that it seems like it went on for quite a while. And so people would probably go, right, let's get protected here. And so now that makes sense, you know, with that discovery there, that they found all these particles which proved there was some kind of multiple airburst that lasted for I think several hours. You know, that's what they say. And so it would have actually, you know, and it caused massive destruction, you know, because it was so close to the Earth. And so it wasn't actually an impact, but it was the airburst. But weirdly, at this site, they then, after that had all happened and they got themselves together, they carried on that same settlement, just carried on building there and working the land and developing agriculture in that area. So, you know, they did carry on afterwards as well. But yeah, so it makes sense that maybe these pockets of underground areas may have been, if anything bad was happening, they could actually go there and hide out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd always kind of assumed it was due to whatever climate change was happening during the Younger Dryas, you know, that all of a sudden it seems like everyone went into caves, and South America was doing cave arts. You know, people went underground during Kuyu, people, you know, starting to... So that was always kind of my assumption, that however the climate change during that time period forced people to go underground, whether it was, you know, too much solar radiation or just, you know, whatever it might have been. But yeah, the airburst thing is pretty interesting.
That is pretty interesting. I mean, there's another one. Yeah, here we go. This is it's one of the sites that I think was affected. Yeah. In fact, George Howard's mentioned on there. And this is, yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, you've also got, like, there's other theories as well. The Younger Dryas isn't the only theory. Some people say it's solar outbursts kind of causing horrific effects, that the magnetic field was badly affected around this time, and it would actually reduce to such a low level that the radiation would be extremely harmful, things like this. So there's different theories now. It's not just like one fixed thing, and different effects of the Younger Dryas as well. You know, different areas, some with direct impacts, some with airbursts and things like this. So yeah, it would make sense that you want to have a decent roof or umbrella.
Right. Have the ability to at least hide. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why billionaires are making bunkers today, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Just in case. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that first site that I can never pronounce that you pulled up on your computer, can we take a look at that one more time?
Which one was that? Sayburch. Yeah, for sure. Let me just find that. Yeah, that is one of the most interesting ones. In fact, here's an image. Let me just play this. This is actually before. This is a scan I did before the roof was, before the house was taken away. So you can see it's like inside, you know, it's in the interior here. And also the name of it, I've got to mention the name of this. I think I mentioned this last time, but this always gets me. And this to me is like a big yay to, like, the whole idea of these were astronomical sites. Because say translates to counting. Birch translates to sign of the zodiac or horoscope. And in Kurdish, birch means tower or watchtower. Now, there's good evidence, and we talked to the locals about this, that there was originally a tower, like a stone tower, in the Sayburg village, going back to, 70 to 100 years ago. And the stones were sold by the local mayor to get some funding for the village so people could use it for building. So that this tower could have been one, like we see at Jericho. It could have been one like you see at Tel Karamel down in Syria, where there were known structural towers there. And so there may have been one here, and it may be recorded in the name of the site, which I think is really interesting. It's more likely this was an astronomical site. This was like where they were taking observations from. This particular enclosure is at the very top of the hill, and it would have been a perfect place to watch the horizon from. And so I believe that there's something in that. This just shows you.
Is that the house, the wall behind it right there? That would have been, or is that a? That's
Yeah,
not,
that's still that was. This was when it was still buried. So
yeah.
not buried. This is when the house was still on top of it, and that was one of the walls. Yeah,
that's one of the walls of the house.
yeah. So they kind of completely removed that away.
And the thing on the guy's head, is there a closer up image of that guy's face or head to see what he's wearing?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like almost like some kind of hat. Yeah, but it looks like some kind of flat area. But what's above it, I think, is particularly interesting, which we can see kind of. You see, I can't really see it in that one. I'll have to open up the other one again.
There we go.
But there's, yeah, there you go, there you go. So it's got the eyes carved. It's got like a kind of cut mark above the head, and it's got a V-neck, which is a tradition we find at Karahan Tepe, also at Eartha Man or Balikligal statue.
Bringing back the 90s.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's very Star Trek as well. So we've got that to consider as well. So there's quite a few different things going on at these sites. I mean, not a huge amount has been discovered in this dig season, but they're extending the dig this year because they've got this big congress coming up in Shanlurfa in November, which is one of the. We're not going to be going to it, but that's a lot of the new data is going to be presented there, which should be quite interesting. So hopefully, they're cracking into it, and we're going to see some new stuff come out in the next couple of months.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Any stone bowls or plates found at the site?
There are a few at Karahan Tepe, yeah, for sure. There's some at Karahan Tepe. There's a few come out of Göbekli Tepe. There's a few that have come out of Ayaan La Hoyak as well. I'll just bring up a couple of images here. I think I've got them somewhere. Yeah, these are the ones that are in the museum. So these are actually in Shanlurfa Museum. Sorry about that, I've got them here eventually. And these are quite big. Some of them are 3 feet wide. Some are made of basalt. Some of limestone. There's different types of stone. What's interesting about this is that there are lots of different types of stone being used, and to me it feels like these were being brought in from other areas as part of the ceremony, part of the kind of ritual year, which I believe they were carrying out different things at different times a year. That's why they were so obsessed with marking the winter solstice, different astronomical events. We can see some of the detail on one of the edges of one here. These were found mostly, the ones here anyway, were found mostly on the benches in between the T-pillars at Karahan Tepe. Now, some have been found at Göbekli Tepe. There's a few on display. But the ones at Karahan Tepe, there's like dozens of them, possibly hundreds of them. Wow. And then a new cache was found recently here. This is, it's not my photo, but this is in an area of Karahan Tepe that's been recently excavated, and they call it the kitchen. This is like the kind of name they've given to it because this is where it extends further than this. This is an area where they believe they're preparing food for the kind of people at the site. And there's also a hearth there where they were heating things up. The weird thing is they found animal bones here, but one of the things that they definitely found here was a whole series of Anatolian viper skeletons, like snake skeletons. And I'm like, did they eat snakes?
They're doing drugs.
Yeah, this is more likely, yeah. This is what I'm thinking. I mean, this could have been an alchemical kitchen. That's what we're calling it. Me and Andrew and our friend Debbie, we just decided to call it the alchemical kitchen. It's a much more cool name, And because you're finding Anatolian viper bones, you can take the venom from the Anatolian viper and create a powerful, quite dangerous psychotropic. And there's also symbolism here of mushrooms all over the site. We have potentially other things they were using. This could have been where they brewed some of the beer, because calcium oxalate was found in some of the vats, the large containers at Göbekli Tepe. And that could have had ergot growing on it. There could be all sorts of things they were into back then. But some of these vessels, I mean, you can see some here. They're very, very large. Some are 2 or 3 feet wide. Some of the bowls at the back, this is all stone. None of this is ceramic. This was pre-pottery Neolithic era, before they were making pottery. So this is all probably 11,400 to like 10,200 years ago. And so that's quite impressive. I mean, in its own right, that's quite impressive. Even if it's limestone, it's still quite cool.
Right.
They're still doing, but some of it's basalt, some of it's granite, some of it's tough stone.
That's incredible. And they're perfectly round.
Some of them are really, really accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got like.
I mean, maybe not perfectly, but round enough that this wasn't chiseled away with a hand tool, right?
I mean, some of these are very much polished. You can see that here. I mean, especially on the dark one in the middle there. You see, like the way that there's almost like an indentation, like a cut mark. It's almost like smoothed into it. So some people have said that's because of grinding, but that looks like polishing to me. When you get up close and have a look at that, that is like polishing. That isn't just, grinding some, grains and seeds in there. That'd be a bit rougher, a bit more kind of non in the middle, So so this is kind of intriguing. And then you got this shaping around the edge. Now you can see it's not, precise on this one in particular, but it's still pretty good. I mean, 12,000-year-old, nearly 12,000-year-old. So you got these ones here, but there's a couple of other ones they found, and
I mean, those were turned, right? They would have had to have been turned on some sort of a lathe, right? I mean, or some sort of a turning device. I mean, it's not a potter's wheel because it's not pottery, and it's not that's a very, very round objects, right?
Yes, they are. There's a lot of accuracy going on here, and especially when you start looking, when I've started looking into the geometry and the measurements of everything, there's a lot of accurate, a lot of detailed, focused creation here. It's not random. This isn't just some kind of random event. These are kind of there's a legacy of this building up to this as well.
None with handles, it doesn't look like.
Not that I'm aware of, but some have beautiful carvings on. There's some found at sites like Jan Lahoyak and a few in Kortik Tepe, which is even older than this, which have got beautiful carvings, all made of stone as well.
But even that one by the red bucket on the ground, the round one, it looks like it has a depression in it, similar to that.
Yes.
Similar to that plate that we saw in the other image. So
Yeah.
so that was functional. They were using that middle part of the plate for something.
But it makes me question, if this was a kitchen, I mean, would they use plates like this for food, or would they make them out of wood, or would they make them out of something else? I mean, because they had lime mortar, they had terrazzo, which is like which would heat up to 850 degrees limestone to get the kind of lime plaster. So they could have made things out of that if they wanted to. Why did they want to create these giant stone plates? Were they for food? Was it like a fruit bowl? What was it? Then we got these little devices as well, these little things that were found. The top right one there is interesting. That's limestone. But around you can see it's got like
Same depression.
Yeah, another depression in it. But around the edge, you see it's got that kind of edging around it. That's actually got chevrons all around it. Really nicely shaped chevrons all the way around it, perfectly. You can just about see it on there on the top right. You got like on the top left, you got like a shaft straightener. It's what they call it. And the symbol on it is really interesting. That's the same symbol we find at Kortik Tepe, which is an earlier site, hundreds of miles away along the Tigris River.
A shaft straightener.
That's what they call it, yeah.
So for like straightening a stick or something?
I guess so, yeah. For like, weapons,
spears,
things like spears.
Canes or whatever, yeah.
On the bottom left, you've got this tiny little kind of frog or toad. It's like less than an inch wide. Beautifully carved out of, and they found serpentine, they found nephrite, they found crystal, objects from Göbekli Tepe.
Wow.
So it's pretty, they were working with very hard stone, and they were up for it. They were into it. They were like experimenting, and you could see that, and you can see this kind of abstract, artistic kind of way of thought, which dominated this culture, which really began with Göbekli Tepe, really kicked off at Göbekli Tepe, although you could see some sites building up to it. And the thing I like about it is that the style spec didn't change until the end of the culture, like 1,500 to 2,000 years later. So it was the same. They came up with the design for everything, stuck with it. It's a bit like Egypt, it's a bit like Mayan style. You get that they stick with the same style. And it just didn't fluctuate. It's really bizarre. There's variations in it, artistic variations, but not that much. Just changed a little bit. Yeah.
The one thing that I don't understand is if it was intentionally buried, why would you leave all the plates and the beautiful stone carved objects in the bottom of it just to be buried by a bunch of dirt and cracked by the pressure of the earth? A lot of these plates, like why not take that stuff out? If it really was intentionally buried, why not remove that stuff first?
I know. It's interesting because the plates themselves are very much. A lot of them were found placed on the benches between the T-pillars, broken mostly, some not broken, but they were clearly just before they buried it, and they know they buried Karahan Tepe. They know it was deliberately buried. It's been proven by the head archaeologist there. He's done a paper on it. Well, like Göbekli Tepe, there's debates now because there's a slope slide hypothesis which has now come in, but at Karahan Tepe, so what they did, they must have like ceremonially kind of broken some of the plates, placed them on the benches in between the T-pillars, and then covered it over.
How was it proven? How was it proven that it was intentional?
The analysis done by the head excavator Neshmi Karal, he's the head archaeologist there. When they were digging it, they noticed all the different layers, and they tested all the different layers, especially in the structure AB or the pillar shrine, where you have the kind of the head coming out the side of the pillars, the one that's got the winter solstice alignment in it. So that was the main. But then he realised through the layers of the main enclosure, they very methodically went down and checked. They realised it wasn't, accidentally sloping in, sliding in. This was an actual deliberate fill.
But what was it about the layers? Were all the layers the same from
different? No, there were different materials actually. I think I've got an image of it here somewhere. But there was actually different materials going down into the structure itself. But he found all these different materials, like different mud, different layers of stone, even certain types of pebbles. Some coming in from not the local area. Then at the very top, this is all in the pillar shrine or structure AB, found these, then there was large kind of slabs to cover it over completely. And so that particular area, the pillar shrine, structure AB, that was very carefully covered up and closed down, and almost, so they wanted to keep it in the perfect condition for some reason, which I believe I know the reason. Whereas the rest of the site, they deliberately broke and pushed over the T-pillars, broke the plates, broke the statues in 3 places, and then buried it. But left everything in place and placed everything where they wanted it, and then buried it. Whereas the pillar shrine was very much preserved. And the reason they would do that, and I believe we've got a very good case for that, is because of the winter solstice sunrise alignment. It would have made sense for that. I mean, we've got an image of the pillar shrine here. It's just another scan, and this was filled in completely. And this is all. Remember, this is mostly bedrock. Yeah. So if you want to preserve something, you bury it as it is. So they preserved it really well. That's actually looking through the hole towards the head, which is huge. And and we completely believe, me and J.J. Ainsworth, and even Andrew's got our back on this as well, is that they wanted that if it ever got uncovered, they wanted everyone to know, hey, we can record the winter solstice, thank you very much. We're quite good at this. And they were doing it. And so luckily they did. It's all in bedrock, so you can't move anything. Nothing can be shuffled around to get in the way. It's all there, fixed. And so I think that's why they preserved this particular enclosure so carefully, because they wanted to preserve this alignment that comes through, and you can witness it yourself if you go there today. Amazingly, this is what you see when you kind of look at it, basically, over a 45-minute period. So to me, that's fascinating, and it also gives a reason why it was buried, and I think that's one of the most valid reasons. Otherwise, why wouldn't they damage this area? Why wouldn't they break the pillars like they did in the rest of the site? Why leave this one in really good condition? And so that I think is compelling, to say the least. Yeah.
Going back to the hole in the ground, at the. Is that where you're saying the tower may have come out of, or is
No.
No. Okay.
No,
Okay.
the tower was further down, further north in the village somewhere. Now, there's lots of stonework all through the village. Because we know there were Romans nearby, Byzantines, and there could be some of the tower could have been used to build the village itself. But no, that hole there is unusual, though.
Yeah. What is it? What's
I
the deal
don't
with
know.
the hole?
Well, that is a strange thing because there's not many sites that have that, although there are kind of shallow holes at Göbekli Tepe which have been covered up with slabs, but not too much. In fact, I've got an image of that here. I can find that in a moment. But that is, there's different ideas. Some people say it was a relatively modern carving and they were using it for some reason. Who knows? It doesn't go down. It goes down about maybe 5 feet. But if you go into the underground chamber, just to that side of this enclosure, and you go deep in the ground, in that, further over that side, you look up in the ceiling, and there's a hole carved out 20 feet up to the surface. Not this one, but another one.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what the hell? I know. So was that just for light? Is there something under this that may have once connected to? Mm-hmm. There is that possibility as well. There could be a whole underground area here. That's a whole thing. If that ever gets excavated or it gets discovered, we don't know. But if you look at the traditions of, because this is very much, a lot of people say this is like a kiva, like a Native American kiva. It's like a sacred ceremonial space that you find at Chaco Canyon and places like this, and they often have holes in them. I think actually Graham mentioned this in the recent episodes of Ancient Apocalypse. He pointed out that in Chaco Canyon, that, and that's where the kind of people emerged from, where the gods came up, or the people came up from like the underworld into this world. And so you get the same symbolism here, but it may have a completely different meaning to them. We just don't know. But it's interesting that it's very similar to a sunken, like kivas are often sunken down, a few feet into the bedrock, then they build around it. And so that's intriguing, yeah.
Yeah, but at the bottom of that hole is bedrock as opposed to dirt?
Well, you can't really go down it. I certainly couldn't fit down it, but it just stops about 4 or 5 feet down. And I don't know if that's just filled in, or if maybe it's just got rubble built up in it. We don't know.
It'd be pretty interesting.
It would be pretty interesting, yeah.
Put a high-powered pressure hose or something to try to see if it really goes down deeper.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the underground areas next door connect to it somehow. It would make sense. Yeah.
What do you think this whole 36 by 42 inch oval circle thing, what do you expect to find when they take all the rubble off the other side of it? Do you think it's just flat out carved flat bedrock, or do you think there's going to be, what's your wildest speculation?
So there's a whole couple of areas. So over on the left, you've got the broken kind of circle on the left. That's where we were just looking at. That's the area of the main enclosure. On the right, this is the whole new excavation area. So there's a huge amount being uncovered, and you can see there's an entire village built on top of it. Now, unfortunately, most of this is going to be gone. They're going to get rid of this.
What do you mean?
Well, they're going to demolish it. They've already started.
The homes.
Yeah. So we're talking to the locals actually, and we may, if it's appropriate, if we have a chat with them about it. We think they're getting funded and properly paid for it and everything. But if they're not, we might set up a crowdfunding thing and just help them out a bit, because we could easily raise some money for them, because it's annoying. You got generations of families living in one spot. They happened to build it on a Tastabla site, and now they're getting kind of.
Are any of those homes for sale?
That's a good point.
I mean, I'd be happy to buy one of those homes and start digging.
Okay, I'll put that to them. We'll put in an offer. Yeah.
It's totally serious.
I know you are for some reason.
But you're saying the government's got control of this, and they're going to start bulldozing it and excavating the whole thing?
I think once they discover archaeology there, it becomes, even though there's grey area over who owns it, because technically they still own it. I think the people who own the land, but they kind of allow the government to do things, and they fund it so that they become the owners. It becomes a military zone as well, like I think at Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. It officially becomes military kind of to protect it, I think, mainly. So I don't know what's happening here, because the problem is people own all the land here, lots of different people. So I can find out.
Yeah.
I will make inquiries.
Yeah,
You can have a
yeah.
little kind of, Matt Beale house,
Yeah, yeah.
Matt Bell house there.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, it would be pretty cool to get to the bottom of some of these things. I think we could probably get it done safer and faster,
And here we have this is the area that's been excavated, the southern area, I think. And yeah, so a bunch of stuff's coming out of the ground. I mean, you can see that it's all buried, deliberately, probably. There's our group there having a little scoot round, earlier this year. And this is interesting. This is like a huge U-shaped stone. We went there on the left,
Wow.
bottom left there. We went there 1 week last September. And then a few days later, we turn up and they've excavated the whole thing. And this is interesting because at the bottom right of it, you actually have a little kind of perforation cut through the stone. Just behind the camera there, but there's a perforation cut right through it, as though some kind of rope was tied to it. Now this is traditionally what's called a dromos stone. This is like a kind of entrance stone into enclosures, and we know that because Klaus Schmidt uncovered one, or two of them really, evidence of two of them at Göbekli Tepe, leading one into enclosure C, another one I think into enclosure B or A. And so these are big, these are like 6 feet wide, and they got little designs on top. On the one at Göbekli Tepe has all these little critters, animals, and it's almost like you go from, it's like it's like crossing over the boundary into a liminal space from the mundane to the sacred. This is like, and he called them dromos because that's the name given really in Greek tradition, where the entrances to the temples there, going back 500 BC or so in certain parts of Greece, like Delphi and other places, and even Minoan and Mycenaean sites as well. And so that was quite interesting to sort of note that discoveries like that are being made actually at Sayburch itself. And there's quite a few things coming out. There's even human remains have also been found. This is a whole cache of bones, disarticulated as well. They're all broken up to about 14 individuals, they think, in one area. We got this photo ourselves last September, but we couldn't really publish it until they published it.
Right.
So right. That's the thing I think that annoys the archaeologists over there. I mean, we're very respectful.
Yeah.
We're not going to do anything illegal or anything like that. We'll go there, we'll have a look around, we'll get photos, get footage, but we won't publish it if they don't publish it first sometimes, just because of, especially when it comes to human remains.
Right.
Especially.
Are you sitting on any crazy photos now that haven't been published?
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
What category would they fall into?
The underground area, we've known about that for a couple of years, so I'll provide a couple of photos of that for sure.
Yeah.
But I couldn't put it in my lecture really. But I mean, it's very interesting in Turkey because they're making discoveries now. It's happening.
Right.
All constantly. There's lots of new things coming out. Little things, little discoveries here, there, and everywhere. And we just want to tell everyone about it. But sometimes you're not really supposed to. So we have to kind of find that balance. We don't want to upset anybody. But they're doing good work there. I mean, I know they're very slow at Göbekli Tepe, but they now look like they're up in the pace after a bit of pressure. Karahan Tepe, they're going for it. So they are at Sayburch as well. They're also working currently at a site called Sefer Tepe, which is nearer to Karahan Tepe, down in the southeast area of that region. They're working at a site called Harbet Zuvan Tepesi, which again is further in that area of the Tek Mountains. They're not started really on Ayan Lahoyek yet. They're not started on Kurt Tepe. We tried to find Tasli Tepe, which is one of the sites, the most northerly one of these sites really. Nothing left there really, it's still buried, but we did find a broken T-pillar in the village, just lying around, which was originally reported by Bahattin Selik, one of the early archaeologists, like 15 years ago, and it's still there, broken, lying around in the village walls, which surprised us. But it's there, and so there's still stuff to be done. You can see why they're doing their best. I think But Göbekli Tepe is like a big tourist site now. There's big money involved. They get funded by all these different people. I know Jimmy's talked about this. Whereas the other sites are kind of a bit more low key, and they're just cracking on with it. There's no one really talking about them too much. So I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting stuff coming out of the ground. I mean, this is the whole region here. I mean, this is the Jan Lahoyak. Actually, this is very interesting. So this is yet to be excavated, but this is the whole region here, so you can get a sense of what we're looking at.
And that's only what we found.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 12 or so sites,
yeah.
But now they're saying there's 38 sites, definitely. You know, we know a bunch of them. We've checked out some of them, but some of them there's not much there. They're very small sites. Some of them are satellite sites. Some they're not going to find T-pillars. Like they haven't found any T-pillars to Çakmak Tepe. That's actually older than Göbekli Tepe. They haven't found any at Göçü Tepe either. But they are finding them at most of the other ones, and they are going to find a lot more. In fact, we found a T-pillar at Jan Lahoyak. Here's some plates as well from Jan Lahoyak that we were shown by the local people.
Wow.
Yeah, and some artifacts.
Wow.
So on the left there's actually a part of a broken T-pillar just lying in a field, and I mean, it's battered. It's been like ploughed over, I think. But yeah, there is a T-pillar there. And like no one's
too heavy for
no one's
anybody to
interested.
steal.
Joking aside, we would never.
No,
take,
I know.
We
no,
wouldn't.
no,
Even,
no.
I wouldn't even take it.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't. Though.
It's big and it's battered.
Yeah.
And they must know about it. We put it in our videos and mention it in the book. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be big news in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Watch that name, Jan Lahoyak. That's going to go big. And the fact is, you know, we got chatting with the locals. We met with the local mayor of the town, and he showed us all these artifacts. We were like, whoa, really? And there's broken plates there made of stone and other pieces.
It's almost like a core drill, right? That round.
The one at the back, I think it might be a fossil of some sort. The one at the far back on the right.
The second one up from the bottom middle. It's like a round.
Could be.
It's like Petrie's Core 7, except a little bigger and not grainy.
I do have close-ups of these of each one, so
Okay.
I can send you them. I've actually got scans of a couple of them as well.
Perfect. Yeah,
I can
right.
happily send you them for your research as well. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think you got to accept that there's a lot of strange stuff still going to be coming out of the ground. I mean, talking about these artifacts, we were looking at some. So we were looking at these, weren't we? We were looking at these, and we were looking at these. But I think what's of interest is that there are older sites going further south into Syria, going into Israel, Lebanon, Jordan. You know, the Natufian culture, which goes back to 14,500 years ago. And some of the stuff coming out of there, not only are we talking about geometries, you know, within the structures they built, they have stonework, carvings and everything else, but they have things like this. And this is like 2.5 to 3 feet tall, carved out of solid basalt, I think. And this is just on display at the museum in, I think, Jerusalem.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got a scan of this one as well.
Unbelievable. I mean, the perfect roundness. I mean, maybe I'm sure it's not perfect, but that's incredible.
I mean, that's it from above.
Wow.
And there's several of these. This isn't just one of them.
14,500 years old ish.
This one, I believe, it's around that. I mean, I don't have the data with me, but they go from 14,500 up to the pre-pottery Neolithic,
which was
12,500 years ago.
Okay.
So 11,500 years ago. So there's a whole era, very pre-Göbekli Tepe cultures making these. I think
right in the Ice Age, they're making stuff like this in Turkey.
Well, this is in this would be in Israel.
And okay.
Going down into Israel and Syria.
Okay.
There's a few glitches in my scan, so it is pretty much perfectly shaped.
That bump on the outside is a glitch in the scan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just the shadows and everything.
Yep.
So there's no actual bump there.
Got it.
It's pretty much. You got a little kind of that's a weird little part. It's like a little circle with little indentations, like a little style on it.
It looks more like limestone than basalt.
It could be limestone. To be honest with you, I don't have the information in front of me here, but this is
Either way, it's amazing.
It's pretty cool. I think some of them are basalt though.
Yeah.
Some are definitely basalt. And that's just a photo of it. Look at that little indentation, that little circle in the middle there, the bottom in the middle. It's like got little indentations and a kind of curve on it. So that could have been just like, doodling. But yeah, nonetheless, it's very, very interesting.
But no turning device until 12,000 years after this is the the story.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah, so the Natufians are very interesting people. I mean, I've been writing about them for the forthcoming book, and the more I look into them, the more blown away I am, because these are clearly one of the strong influences of the Taztepala culture. They clearly went further north, and I think they were definitely involved in a site called Chakmak Tepe. I mean, there's stuff there which is just Natufian. I mean, it really is. Although officially they went no further than central kind of northern Syria, but clearly they were influenced, because some of their structures as well, which we find all along the Euphrates, further south than obviously Göbekli Tepe, we find geometry and possible standard units of measure. Now, I'm not going to go into that too much now, but they're there, and this is actually the work of Avi Gopher, who worked on the geometry, the equilateral triangle of Göbekli Tepe, and found interesting things there, Göbekli Tepe. But that he's found certain structural kind of geometry principles at play going back 14,000 years, and it's like, these people were really quite smart. They weren't. They're the same size brain as us, really, in reality. So they just probably were utilizing it in the way they knew, what they thought best. And I mean, here's some other pieces. These are actually from a site called Ainan. These go back to 12,500 BC, so 14,500 years ago. So these are actually that old.
Wow.
Now these are a bit more rough hewn, but still, they're carving these out of stone.
Yeah.
Long before Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
Right.
Fascinating. I mean, and so there is, but there are different influences though when it comes to the Taztepala culture. You got from the south. You got the Natufians. That's pretty solid in my opinion. You've got coming in from the west. You got really the Anatolian or even possibly European kind of influence. Even from Cyprus, they've now found these 12,000 or over 12,000 year old boat evidence going between the mainland of Turkey and Syria and Cyprus. So they were navigating before Göbekli Tepe. And that is interesting to me. And Cyprus is a whole other thing that needs to be looked at, I think. I'm going to start looking into that soon.
I don't think I've seen that. So Ice Age, end of the Ice Age, they're navigating on boats.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Wow.
Before that, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Graham has mentioned that in his recent article as well, on his website. And also we have influences coming in from the north. It's something that Andrew Collins is very much focused on, about they found evidence of microblade technology that goes back 30,000 years coming in from the Russian steppes, Siberia originally coming down, sort of migrating downwards into the area. You have, again, this is Andrew, and also Klaus Schmidt spoke about this. They found these, what are called Helwan points, certain points that were found. Helwan is in Egypt, so there's pre-pottery Neolithic activity in Egypt. We know we've got the site of Toshka, I think it's called, where there's some photos which look like there's some of these vases in the burials there, which is fascinating. Ben was showing me this, Ben van Kerkwyk. So there are connections all over that region, and this is why I think this is a super civilization. This culture was much more widespread than just that region in southeast Turkey. I think it stretched quite a bit further wider, and they were using boats. And then we can
And so what time period? So you're talking like 12,000 BC to like in like 15,000 I mean years ago, 12,000 years ago to 15,000 years ago ish, and that
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
that would have been this super civilization that you're talking about that would have spanned.
Well, I think it really kicked off, with Göbekli Tepe, 9,600 BC, just after the end of the last Ice Age. That's when it really took off. That's when it became what I call this kind of master, this high culture, this super civilization, whatever you want to call it. Now, people debated me on the name, but I like that name, super civilization, because I think it's much bigger than Tastepala region. It goes vastly wider than that. And it would be the first one on the planet at the time, that is known about at least. And now we know that there's possible earlier Ice Age civilizations that Graham's talks about, other people have talked about. But I think we have to kind of, keep that in mind, that this was a very sophisticated people. I've actually I've got something I just want to show you, because there's another site which comes a little bit later than this, which is called Atlit Yam. Now this is a very interesting place. This is off the coast of Israel. A whole series of pre-pottery Neolithic sites. The late pre-pottery Neolithic going into this sort of standard Neolithic. Now they found like a whole settlement underwater that goes back to 7,400 BC. Now this is a bit later, so I believe that it goes even up to this era, up to like 6,000 BC. They were moving around, they were moving out of the Tastepala region when agriculture came in. And they found this like stone circle construction, it's got cut marks. But what is really interesting is they've actually found possible alignments here with the solstices again, like we have here. So they found this where the red lines are. Actually borrowed this. I want to thank Matt Simpson from Ancient Architects. He created this graphic in one of his videos. But this alignment here, although Clive Ruggles, this archaeoastronomer from Britain, for some reason said this was a winter solstice alignment, it's actually a summer solstice alignment. And you can see that the angle there, where their red lines are. And number 56 on the image is actually, the stone circle is actually this, which we looked at. So you've got stone circles, you've got corridors made of stone aligning with the solstices back then. And there's even speculations about, the planisphere of the heavens are encoded in the stones there. So I find this particularly interesting when we're looking at, because I'm in our upcoming book, we're really looking at why this winter solstice thing was so important to them at Karahan Tepe. But now we're finding so much evidence in other areas before and after Karahan Tepe of this kind of thing going on. That they had this obsession with needing to know about the solstices in different times of year. I mean, we even have this Jericho as well.
Wouldn't that only be for like planting crops? I mean,
no,
not only.
It's
so
not,
ceremonial.
It's not all about planting crops, no, because this was before agriculture.
Was it?
Well, officially it was.
Yeah, officially.
But I mean, if we look here, you've got Paleolithic alignments, which we can look at in a moment. But Jericho's another one with a summer solstice sunset alignment. So one of the ideas, this is from anthropologists who studied with, tribes and things like this as well, and looking at these Paleolithic alignments and even early Mesolithic alignments. The solstices were the easiest ones to record because it's the extreme point on the north and south of the horizon, which it's much easier to record than, say, the equinoxes, which goes east twice a year but moves too fast to kind of fix an easy point on it. And I think that's where the kind of key is. It's like the solstices are the key. The equinoxes are kind of useful if you're doing longer cycles of precession of the equinoxes, where you're looking at where the sun rises in certain constellations over vast periods of time, but not for the annual kind of stuff. It's really the solstices are the key to that. And the reason that's interesting is because we've got places like Lascaux in France, which is 17,000 BC, 19,000 years ago. You've got the Chauvet Caves, again in France. These goes back 32,000 BC, 34,000 years ago. And this is it was actually Martin Sweatman, I want to credit him, who put me onto this. He gave a lecture for Megalithomania at a conference. And he posted this image, which I've kind of adapted, which is from an article by some very, very interesting academics. And what they found is that they found that Actually, what have we got before that? Yeah. They found that the alignments of the cave entrances in Paleolithic caves, where there's paintings at the back of the cave, at certain times of year, like specifically the winter solstice sunrises and the summer solstice sunsets, the light would come in, illuminate the caves enough where you could, all the artwork is illuminated, just enough at the back. So that could have been when they painted them, so they would have the light to paint them. And so that's why they specifically chose caves with certain entrances. And this graphic here shows you the number of decorated caves on these azimuths. The orange is the winter solstice sunrise, and the blue is the summer solstice sunset. Whereas the rest of them are kind of arbitrary. There's not much else. There's no equinox ones really. A couple of them are to the north, things like this. But when they're decorated or painted caves, they align to either the winter solstice sunrise or the summer solstice sunset majorly. And Lascaux especially, that really does. That's the summer solstice sunset. That's the most famous one. So we have to consider that there's something quite profound going on here, even at this early time. But then when you look at it, you realize that perhaps this wasn't about planting crops. This was about choosing the feast days. This was choosing the dates of the ceremonies, choosing the dates of the rituals. There's even this image here. We have the hands. These were found in some of the ones associated with these times of year. And these are kids' hands. So now there's even suggestions that these were kind of initiation rites, like rites of passage, going from one age to the next part of your life, from youngster to a teenager and things like this. And so it could be more ceremonial. It could be more focused on choosing the feast days, choosing the times of initiation. It was useful for hunting because you know when certain animals were migrating. It had its uses as well. And then later it became really important with agriculture, because they could easily kind of work out the times of the year, especially combined with the moon. The moon in between the solar cycles, they could kind of get quite accurate dating. There's lots of these kind of things like this that were found. This goes back to 30,000 BC in France, Abri Blanchard, and this shows you potentially the sequence of circles showing the waxing and the waning moon. Even back then, they were making these observations. And to me, this is really fascinating because it makes sense that the winter solstice alignment at Karahan Tepe may have been a kind of legacy building up, when it was more about choosing the feast days, choosing the dates of the ceremonies and things like this. Then it developed into astronomy and understanding more about the planets, the Milky Way, where Venus rises, and then the moon cycles. And even into cultures that didn't even need it afterwards, they still focused on the solstices, like at Stonehenge and other places, Newgrange and many other places. So I think the solstices are more important than people realise. They're not just about one, about growing food or anything like this. There's a whole different element to this.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, to me, to think about the possibilities of what our ancestors were doing and when they were doing it and how they were doing it is just fascinating. Not to so for me, I guess or let me just ask a question or two. The pre-pottery Neolithic people, when were they? What was their time period?
It goes from 9,600 BC up until around I think 8,200 BC or thereabouts, and then the later phase of that goes up to around 7,400 BC or so. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it starts around 9,600 BC. It's generally when Göbekli Tepe really kicked in.
So help me with how our ancestors in 9,000 BC would have been pre-pottery, and yet in 12,000 BC or 13,000 BC we're seeing hard stone carved objects.
Yes.
Yeah. How is that? How is it that there's that? Yeah. Let's answer that one first. I've got.
It's a good. Yeah. Basically, that they worked with stone and bone that were like this. This is bone plaque. They definitely. But stone was their medium. They just did it. That's all that. The thing is, lime plaster and terrazzo, which are made pretty much the same way, were known about before the time of Göbekli Tepe. So they could have created objects with this lime plaster, but instead they just used it to make floors and to cover up, walls or parts of their structures. And that was pretty much it. They didn't really use it for much else. And so that's interesting. I mean, why didn't they could have developed that and started making ceramics with that? I mean, they knew how to heat things up because they had to heat up the terrazzo. To get the terrazzo, they had to go up to 850 degrees Celsius. Anyway, so so they could have done it, but they didn't. They stuck with the stuff. Why that is, I don't know, but I think they just got to a point where they were so good with the stone, they worked out how to do it, and I think it may have been part of their kind of tradition, just slowly working the stone. It was like what they did, how they did it,
But no pottery found prior to that.
Apparently not, no.
Yeah, interesting.
It's pre-pottery Neolithic.
Yeah, right.
Before the time.
Right. But the Tashka site, potentially with the images of I thought it was a combination of pottery and hard stone from 12-ish thousand years ago, but that's pre-pottery Neolithic, right?
That is the era, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but they may have been experimenting with it there, but I don't know. As far as I'm aware, I think it must have been made of stone.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Much like you have with these objects here.
Yeah, it's just incredible that they could be working that stone like that and creating those objects that are almost perfectly round, that were clearly turned on something, that they could create that they could create something like Göbekli Tepe and all these sites in Tezteplar, but that they couldn't plant a crop, and that the winter solstice and the summer solstice weren't used as guides for planting. It seems like a disconnect.
It is interesting, but I think they were. It became that, when it became a kind of, it was needed. But it seems like it wasn't for that purpose originally, which I think is fascinating, because it makes you question their whole kind of mindset, what they were thinking. But there is evidence of agriculture long before the standard kind of dates were given, 9,000 BC or so. There are stuff going on down in Syria, down in Israel with the Natufians again. They were experimenting with growing food in a kind of almost like proto-agriculture. They were growing things, they were cultivating certain things, starting to domesticate some animals, but then they would move around to different areas. They wouldn't stay in one place. They'd be semi-nomadic or semi-sedentary, and could go to one place in a different time of year, go and stay in that place, and then come back to another place. There's even evidence of some dates going back 23,000 years, I think, at a certain site not far in Israel, next to in the northern area of Israel. 23,000 years where they started experimenting with stuff, but it seems like that's a one-off. I mean, that is a very strange thing. But so I think there's been experiments with that over the millennia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, take me back. Double click on the boat. This boat that what are the details there?
The details of the Cyprus boat, I don't have details of it yet. I haven't started researching it yet, but I quickly read it, I think in Graham's article, and I kind of had a quick look at it, and it was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because if they're apparently they were moving quite a lot of people back and forth. They weren't small boats. It was like they were quite big, and they were doing it effectively more than once. So I need to do a bit more research on that, but for sure that was happening, and I think this is one of the revelations which is now coming out, and that kind of puts a whole different spin on diffusionism, which is going to really annoy the archaeologists, because if they were able to create such boats like this back then, then people could move around much more freely than people realize.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, Graham and I speculated a little bit about the possibility of ancient humans around the same time period as we're using boats on the other side of the world, actually using boats during the Ice Age to come from Australia, Papua New Guinea, through an island chain that would have existed at the time, with sea levels 400 feet lower and more ice on the poles pushing the equator up into the, so that more underground was exposed. It creates this almost perfect line from essentially west all the way to those areas. Yeah, there it is. This is east between Peru and right where that hits Peru. If you follow that little hockey stick up to the top right, There, Graham showed, and Ryan's going left. But if you follow it to the top right there, yeah, there's this carving on a hill that's basically like this big. It's almost like a trident, and and it shows like, okay, you're here. This is it, and it looks as if that hockey stick for me, it's almost like that was intentionally bringing you there, and then you're hopping along all of these islands, coming from the west, going to the east, going from the east, going to the west, but you're able to navigate much more easily across the Pacific Ocean through these what would have been islands above water. You're able to stop, you're able to repair your boats, you stop for food, you stop for rest, you stop to avoid storms, whatever it might be, but that could make a lot more sense as a way to get from and there's DNA evidence as well from in South America. There's a lot of DNA evidence from like Aborigine people and people from Australia that would suggest that, hey, this is a possibility that people were using boats during the Ice Age and making this cross past Easter Island, which of course has walls that look exactly like they look in Peru. Could those be much older, and could this, as opposed to going in across a land bridge through frozen tundra, and somehow not getting frostbite up there during the Ice Age, could this have made a little bit more sense as a way for people to have populated South America? And South America was much more populated than North America back then. So it's I thought it was pretty compelling speculation.
Yeah, no, I watched the recent episodes that covered that as well of Ancient Apocalypse, and it's compelling, for sure. And I think that kind of could be applied anywhere really around the world. You think about it, moving along the coasts, even on rafts, is much more efficient than going up mountains and walking on beaches and things like that. And you know where you're going. If you've got like little guides along the coasts, little island chains and things like that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so too, and especially to hear you talk about boats being used on the other side of the world during the Ice Age.
Well, you just brought up Graham's article there. I mean, maybe we could have a look at that, and it actually has, I think it has the boats from Cyprus mentioned in that as well, because that is just, I think that's a big breakthrough, personally. And also it could be used along the rivers as well, along the Tigris, along the Euphrates, and things like this. I mean, there was very much a big thing in Egypt, ancient Egypt, where they found the massive, beautiful boats next to the Great Pyramid, literally just there, just buried right there. So they, a few thousand years later, mind you, but still, I mean, that is pretty epic for its time. Yeah, I'm glad he did this, actually. It's a really, really good summary of kind of, setting the standard about what was going on before Göbekli Tepe. I think it was really important that this came out, kind of thing, and this is going to be part in the new edition, I think, of Magicians of the Gods. I'd actually go into some other things here which we can talk about, where about questioning the roof hypothesis at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and how the archaeologists say, well, there were definitely roofs, even though there's not really any evidence for them. And yet, because of that means there's no astronomy at the sites whatsoever.
Right.
So that just gets removed from the kind of everything, and that is kind of frustrating for me, especially.
Why do you think they do that? Just to have less to worry about, or what do you think why would you just exclude that possibility from the realm of possibilities?
It could be because people like me and Andrew Collins and Graham and others come up with these astronomical theories or astrological theories, solstice theories about these sites, and they don't like it. They don't like other people doing it so much. But there's not. I mean, the most fundamental, clear alignment is the Karahan Tepe winter solstice, because you can go there. You can go there this December and see it happen. There's no question it's happening. And it's happening now. It would have looked even better, 10,000, 11,000 years ago. But I think there's a fundamental thing. Even Klaus Schmidt didn't really get into the astronomy side of things when he was there. So he didn't really find any obvious alignments or any obvious symbolism. But now with the work of Martin Sweatman and Graham and Andrew Collins and J.J. Ainsworth and others, it's unquestionable now. It really is unquestionable.
Yeah, it's a shame that they wouldn't just like want that to be a part of the research and just be open to that being a possibility and just say, well, I don't know, and let's have other smart people look at it.
Yeah, I got a few graphics I can show you in a little while for sure, but I think he wants to show us the, this is the boat thing, yeah?
Okay.
Is this the bit? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, 12,000 years ago, and they were going between, like I said, they were going between the Anatolia and the Cyprus, several times per year in order to transport large ruminants like weaned calves or small wild boar. Wild boar, amazing, because you get the wild boar symbolism at Göbekli Tepe as well. I mean, that is absolutely fascinating. Oh my God. Oh. That is very cool. Okay, Matt, you're going to have to
That's cool.
make one of these now.
Yeah,
do some tests.
Right. That's where I stop.
yeah, see if you can get from here to Anatolia.
No. You'll never hear from me again.
Oh, right. So this shows you the different routes as well. Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, I think this is kind of it's going to be one of the big stories coming out, kind of waking people up that there's a level of sophistication and coastal areas as well, and next to river kind of areas as well, which are going to kind of make this much more interesting to look at.
So what about the Sphinx? What dates would you say that is a part of this ancient super civilization, or do you think that was built much after?
It could be. I mean, quite possibly. I mean, traditionally it's built at the time, the fourth dynasty is part of that whole culture, who built the pyramids on the Giza plateau. Obviously, we've got people like John Anthony West and Graham and others who claim it's much older, 10,500 BC. This is because of its orientation to the east, and then in the night sky at that time when the sun rises on the equinox, you will get Leo rising as well. And so it's thought that quite possibly that's the orientation of that. Now, I've actually got an image here, funnily enough, excuse me, of a possible alignment that comes out from Karahan Tepe. And the stellarium image in the background there is looking east. Now, we believe that there's actually a small channel. Where that arrow is, we believe there might be a channel partly carved out through the site looking east. So it may be an equinox alignment. We're not sure because it's still got rubble on it, but where the very edge of the pillar shrine or structure AB, there is definitely a kind of channel at that part of it. So we think there's something going on there. And the reason where this connects with the Sphinx is because looking east, even at 9,400 BC, which is the oldest date for Karahan Tepe, we have Leo rising again with the sun, around the time of the sunrise. So this, or just before the sunrise, or next to it. And so this again could be the same sort of symbology we're seeing on the Giza plateau. However, in that case, we don't think that they saw Leo as a lion. We thought, I believe that they saw Leo as a leopard. The reason being is because there's a lot of leopard carvings, a predominant amount at Göbekli Tepe, and it's very much so at Karahan Tepe. And I think that's really kind of relevant. And even this image here, this one on the right, he's holding a head in his hand, or his kind of paws, this leopard figure, possibly a fox, but possibly a leopard. There's also other leopard carvings that we discovered on the sides of some of the upright bedrock pillars. And this is kind of, this is like the symbol, really, the one on the right of Karahan Tepe. It's really quite amazing. This was found in the main enclosure, kind of facing east.
Wow.
And so, it's speculation, but it may be connected with the winter solstice, because if you got the spring equinox, and we believe, myself and J.J. Ainsworth very much believe, that the winter solstice sunrise is a kind of part of a fertility drama played out over the year, and this has been talked about at sites like Newgrange, even at Stonehenge, by other authors like Aubrey Burke, Terence Meaden, and others, who suggest that the shadows of like the stones at Stonehenge, of the heel stone on the summer solstice sunrise, would penetrate through the kind of feminine portal into the site, one of the trilithons. Likewise, at Newgrange, it's like the male shard of light penetrating through the passageway, like the female part, and going into the chamber, illuminating this womb-like area. And the same principle can be applied with the pillar shrine, and the light coming through, the male shard of light coming through the whole stone, the female stone going into the womb-like chamber with phalluses there, possibly with water in it. And so there could be a suggestion that on the equinox, which is 9 months before, spring equinox is 9 months before the winter solstice, there may have been possibly, sexual rites taking place